Is he in the building? Right, he will be here. That's fine. Item 3 is declaration of interest. Linda?
Thank you, Leader. Just two matters. I've been speaking to Councillor Richard Clark about item 7. I think, Councillor Clark, you wanted to declare the personal interest that you're governor of Cross y Ceiliog Comprehensive School.
Yes, please.
I think those are probably all the declarations for this meeting, Leader. But I just wanted to remind you as you go on to the next item about your declaration.
Yeah, no problem with that.
Thank you.
On to item 4 then, which is confirmation of the Cabinet minutes, which is page 5 to 20. So it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 and 20. Can I just make a comment? At the last meeting on the last Cabinet meeting on the 13th of September, I didn't declare an interest, which I should have done. So item 8, outline business case for Torval and Sixth Form Centre. I omitted to declare a personal interest as a governor and as a Cumbrian, so I'm doing that now. I understand off Linda that's quite permissible. Is that right?
Yes, that's fine. Occasionally, members don't declare until immediately after, and as long as we make that clear and transparent,
that's fine. Good. Right. We're now on to update of actions. You see there. You've got nothing to say, have you, Nigel? Right then, on to item 6, which is the budget 2016-17 and 2017-18. And this is Dave Lilly. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, this is a two-pronged report. It looks first off at our current financial year, 16-17, and provides an update on our forecast and associated reserves position. And then we also talk about the 17-18 position, the provisional settlement from the Assembly, and how that impacts on our estimate preparation process. So the key messages that are coming through are that we have an improving position for 16-17 over our Q1 position. The majority of our 16-17 mitigations are in progress to be implemented this year. We are continuing to see a decline in our reserves position as per the forecasts, and we've received a provisional settlement from the Assembly which is better than our medium-term projections, but they still provide us with a challenging position. So in paragraph 5.1 on page 22, there is the forecast position for 16-17, so you can see there's an improving position from the £1.3 million forecast deficit at Q1 to a 561 deficit at forecast deficit as at the end of September. The primary reasons for the improvements are down to the proactive management of the capital financing budget, where we have not undertaken some borrowing that we were anticipating to do this year, so we're carrying that through into next year, so that gives us a saving this year, and also some of the corporate mitigations are showing to be improved. A number of the service areas are also improving on the forecast position at the end of June. The main two service areas, adverse projections from social care and from communities, remain constant to the Q1 position, and both services have indicated that their forecast deficits, if materialising at this level, will be funded from their own service reserves. Moving through then into the mitigations for 16-17 at paragraph 6. The 6.1 there outlines the delivery of those mitigations, and you can see that 73% of the mitigations are either anticipated to achieve or have been achieved, or at a very low risk of being achieved. Paragraph 6.2 and 6.3 then outline changes that have been made to any mitigations since the Q1 report, but they're very, very minor issues there. 6.3 outlines any additional alternative mitigations that have been identified by the services. The next section then talks around our reserve position, and as I said earlier, it continues to show a decline in position, but that is in line with our forecasts that we've projected throughout last year and this year. Moving on to the provisional settlement for 17-18, we received our provisional settlement from the Assembly on the 19th of October. So if I talk firstly off around the All Wales position, then I'll move through into this Torfaen specific position picture. So at an All Wales position, we saw a funding increase of 0.1%, or 3.8 million pound across all Wales. The Welsh Government reintroduced a floor protection mechanism for councils at 0.5% reduction, so no council will see a reduction below 0.5%. There are a number of varying changes, as you would expect, across the Welsh landscape, from the 0.5% reduction through to the 0.1 increase at Gwynedd. There have been 4 specific grants transferred into the settlement, totaling just over £3 million, and they are outlined in paragraph 8.1. And there's also 1 transfer out of the settlement as well, in relation to the teachers' registration fees. 8.2 then talks about additional resources, notional resources, that the Assembly have made reference to in their announcement. And they are outlined there in a table there. So it was £58 million made available to Welsh local government. The provisional settlement this year contains more information than in previous years on grants. Unfortunately, it still doesn't give us individual local authority allocations. It's still at an All Wales level, but there are more All Wales allocations provided than previously. And the actual declaration from the Welsh Government is outlined in Appendix 2 to their report. There's still no news on the Communities First programme and how that's going to be dealt with, although it will form part of a new super grant from the Assembly regarding preventative measures. There's no reference and forward projections on future year settlements from the Assembly within the announcement in October, although we do anticipate there's something going to come through after the autumn statement at the end of November and in the receipt of our final settlement figure in December. So we then move on to the Torfaen position. So in paragraph 9, that outlines that we had going to receive a 0.5% reduction. We're on at 0.5% without receiving any protection from the floor. So ours is a pure 0.5% reduction. Paragraph 9.2 outlines the changes, so it shows the transfers in and it shows the transfers out as it affects us. Paragraph 9.3 then is a series of actions that we are recommending to Cabinet to endorse of how we will deal with the new funding and the transfers in. As is normal, we are proposing that they're all passported through to the services. Cabinet should note that the capital limit for residential care funding that is outlined within the announcement, it doesn't impart an additional spending power to social care. It merely compensates them for a reduction in income that they're going to receive as a result of the Welsh Government policy of increasing the capital allowance to £30,000 before in assessing benefits. So moving on then, bringing it all together with our 2017-18 estimate process. You'll be recall that in March of this year, we approved a 2-year mitigation programme. We have been working with the services to understand how they are progressing with implementing the 17-18 mitigations approved. And the table in paragraph 10.1 at the top of page 29 provides a snapshot of where they are at the moment, and you can see that the vast majority of the savings mitigations are being implemented or planned to be implemented as per approval. There are a number of mitigations where alternatives are being proposed by the service areas, and there are a couple where no alternative, where mitigations cannot be delivered and where no alternative has been identified. With regards to the alternatives identified, so the middle 2 columns in that table, the 13, they are given the reasons why they can't be implemented, and the alternatives that are being proposed by the services are outlined in Appendix 1. In relation to the social care mitigations, they are going to be considered by the Healthier Committee in November for them to scrutinise and to give comment on. Where the service areas have not provided alternative measures, those deficits have been included within the position that we find ourselves in and outlined at 10.3. So at 10.3, we have where we currently are in the estimate process. So at the moment we have an expected position of 168 million, and we have a current estimate position of 169 million. So we're just over £1 million adrift of our targets. As I said, all those mitigations that were approved by Council in March have been built into these estimates as we've been working through with the service areas, and also where the mitigations haven't been confirmed, they have also been built in as pressures. All service chief officers who are showing an adverse position have been contacted in the last couple of weeks to provide commentary and alternative areas for mitigation to address those pressures, and we've asked for those measures or changes to come back to us by the end of November, so we can then build that in and bring it back to PDF and Cabinet. With regards the forecast, or the expected position, what we have built in additional resources in line with our medium-term financial plan, and they are outlined there. So we've included the pressure for school growth, the change there. In our medium-term financial plan, we were anticipating a fall in pupil numbers. That has switched into a pupil growth position. So we have recognised that within the medium-term financial plan and passing that resource across to our schools. We have recognised the impact of the living wage implementation that we're going through at the moment, and we've also recognised the impact of the National Apprenticeship Levy as well within the figures. We've also recognised the cost of prudential borrowing for the acquisition of the British site, which was approved at last council. So that's the position we find ourselves in. So it's a 1.1 deficit, but anticipated by the end of November we'll be in a position where that is balanced. The next paragraph just very, very briefly comments on the medium term, and basically where we are on that is that we are currently refining and revisiting our medium-term financial plan projections. We're looking to bring that to Cabinet at the end of this month to give you a revised position for 2018-19 and 2019-20. Paragraph 12 then just talks about the next steps. So setting the council tax base again at the end of November, an MTFP update at the end of November. We're anticipating that the final settlement will be with us sometime in December. We have a all-members seminar on the 5th of December, and then we run through from January through till the 28th of February in finalising our budget and our council tax levels. So, and that's it from me. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Nigel. Sorry, thank you, Dave, for that good report. A lot of work obviously gone into this, and I should have, at the very onset, pointed out that Nigel is sitting in for the Chief Executive who couldn't get here this morning. I apologise for not mentioning that. He doesn't look like the Chief Executive right now. Anyway, thank you, Dave. Very, very good. Now then to members. Anthony?
Okay, thank you, Leader. And thank you, Dave, for an excellent, clear report. I think we perhaps don't recognise how lucky we are in the clarity of our financial reporting. I think maybe if I brought along some financial reports from other organisations, that might make us more grateful for the way that our financial reports are always given in a way that doesn't try and blind people with detail and gobbledygook, but makes clear the position we're in and the decisions that we need to make. And I think, wider than that, both Nigel, Dave and their team are a model of financial prudence and good financial management, which we should be particularly grateful for as members in such tough financial times. And as I say, it's not something we should take for granted. 3 key points outlining the current position that we're in are right at the top of the report. The improving in-year position, for which, thank you to all the chief officers who have played a part in that. That's something we'll need to keep working on, but that's an improving position from Q1, so that's to be welcomed. As is the news that we're meeting a majority of the savings measures. Again, that's not something that we should just take as a given, because the kinds of savings measures that departments have had to take are not easy. And the fact that we're meeting a majority of those should be welcomed, because of course the alternative for us as members would be at this position having to go back and sort of dig ourselves out of an in-year hole. Which would, obviously, when things are difficult, it's much better to plan than to be constantly reacting on the back foot, as it were. And the third point there that was outlined in the report is that our reserves are both modest and declining. Reserves are often highlighted in the media, very often without a lack of context. We have to remember, talking about figures, we're talking about a £170 million budget, and a budget that deals with some very sensitive services that people rely on. So I think our reserves in that context are both very modest, and it's good to see that far from stockpiling money on a rainy day, like is sometimes the caricature, that our reserves are modest and are being used prudently to manage such tough times. So that's the 3 points really sort of outlining sort of where we are. The settlement as well should be welcomed, I think, cautiously. It's a better than expected settlement, but it's still very tough. I don't think we should get carried away. Again, I said this last year, at risk of repeating myself, I'll say again, if you'd have walked into this chamber 10 years ago and said that we were minus 0.5% in cash terms, you would have got some very stern looks. So I think that's both testament to the way that we've been able to manage very tough budgets, that we can look at that as less bad than possible, but also a testament to the financial planning that's gone on. I think if we're in a good position now, it's because we budgeted over the medium term and in a prudent way, rather than just sticking our heads in the sand. So I would like to thank Welsh Government for the recognition they've given of the importance of local services, especially in the area of social care. I think they've recognised this year that social care is at the forefront of preventing spend in the NHS, and that therefore it's a false economy to just invest in the NHS at the expense of local government. I think that's a recognition that we hope continues in future years. So that's both a welcome and an expectation of something to come. I think that's important when we compare ourselves to England, where the very fabric of social care in many places is falling apart thanks to really dramatic cuts in their budget. I think it shows that it's good to have both councils and a Welsh Government that believe in the concept of public services and of protecting the vulnerable. And that's something that's worth pointing out. On the flip side, again, every year we say and we say again how much better it would be if we could have multi-year settlements. That would enable us to take this planning to the next level. We're always told by those above us to plan. Of course, if you have the figures to hand, it's much easier to do that. So I'd repeat that plea whilst in the context of welcoming the settlement. Section 12 very succinctly points out the next steps for both members and for the organisation as a whole. I think it's important that we now consider this position, that goes through the scrutiny process and discussions in this place as well as Cabinet members. I think in having those discussions about what we do next, we should keep the corporate plan very, very close to mind. We clearly set out 3 priorities there: education, protecting the vulnerable, and cleaning and greening our borough. And I think in what we do now, we should both take those into consideration, but also the words of the Minister on Thursday at the WLJ conference, that this is very much a chance for us to plan for the future, that we shouldn't, just because the settlement's better than we expected this year, we shouldn't stop planning for the future. We shouldn't, back out of difficult choices. I think that would be the road to longer term problems. And I think as a council in the last 5 years, one of the things I'm proud of is that we haven't put off tough decisions. We haven't just said, let's kick the ball down the road for future councils to deal with. We've done what's responsible and taken the sometimes difficult decisions that we've needed to take to keep the council on a secure financial footing. So just in finishing, I'd like to thank all the officers who've played a part in this report. We really do as members appreciate the work that you do and the lack of sort of in-year unplanned difficulties that we face as a consequence.
Well done, Anthony. Excellent overview of the position we're in, and we're all very pleased that you've thanked the officers in the way that they've constructed this. John?
Yeah. Just to follow on that, Chairman, we did have some discussion on the settlement last night, actually, and I think that we have to acknowledge, as Anthony said, the guidance and the advice that we've had from officers, and also the discipline by the department on this, the medium-term financial planning mitigations over the past 2 years, which I think made the settlement less worse, as to use an adjective that Nigel used. I still think we got a bit of work to do to make sure that we work towards those mitigations. So there's still a lot of work to do, but as you said, it's not as bad as we thought it might be. And grateful thanks to all those officers who advised us on this.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to back up the sentiment that Anthony was stated earlier, that we can view this as a chance to drop the mitigations that we were planning, take the easy option, just carry on doing what we're doing, or see it as an opportunity to kind of reconfigure things in a way that would help mitigate demand further down the future, which is in line with the Future Generations Bill. So yeah, I fully endorse what he said.
Good. Andy, did you want to say something?
Just wanted to come back in at that point and just mention in section 10 some of the presumptions that have been made. I think it's important to, in view of what was decided at Council last year, to welcome the fact that the British acquisitions included in this, also with the living wage, where I hope we can make an announcement very soon, and on the issue that's very topical this week of capital spending and schools, which I think we shouldn't sort of lose the opportunity to comment on. The fact that we've got 2 brand new schools opening up this week is a testament to the work of the Education Department and of the decisions that have been made in this place to invest in our children's education. I think that's something we should be pleased with as a council.
Good. Anybody else? If not, see the recommendations there on page 31. All agree? Sure. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, the report is to appoint a main contractor for the work of replacing Cross Caerleon Comprehensive School. We'll just take you briefly through the report. Key messages, we've reported to Welsh Government with the final business case. We're expecting confirmation of them of their contribution toward the school, which is then noted as in paragraph 3.2 have been matched by ourselves. Section 4 gives the background to the to the progress of the 21st Century Schools programme in general, specifically toward this particular project. But if I take you to the issues and findings section, just picking up on the nature of the award, paragraph 5.2, it's a two-stage design and build contract. First stage being to appoint a contractor to design and come up with a contract sum for the school. Second stage will then be to enter into a further contract for construction of the school. The award was based on a quality cost model, 60-40 in that order, and the scores of the 5 contractors who submitted bids are given in paragraph 5.9. So those given in 5.9 there with the contractors, contractor number 3 being the highest scored contractor based on the model that was submitted. If I take you through the rest of the report then, just pointing out, as Deputy Leader just mentioned, corporate priorities, measures of success noted in 10.2 will completion of this project will work toward the corporate plan priority of raising educational attainment. And then, Leader, just to take you to the recommendation, the Cabinet, subject to confirmation from Welsh Government on their funding, award or approve the award of the contract for the replacement of Cross Caelog Comprehensive School. Thank you.
Good, thanks very much for that. Good report. Dave, do you want to say anything?
That's very kind of it. Never ceases to amaze me, your generosity. No, there's not a great deal that we can say, because this, at this stage, it's more of a development and construction thing. But I will say this, that the new school, any new school, and this gives me an opportunity to follow up on what the Deputy Leader said earlier on, any new school is an achievement, and it's something to celebrate. And I'm sure that those who are concerned with these matters, Steve's department, have done their sums and know that the conclusion that they arrive at in terms of decision making in this sense is the right one. We are in their hands in that one, but after that we await the development, the building process and the outcomes with the same degree of interest and excitement that we attach to the 3 new builds that are currently, well, 1 new build currently underway, almost nearing completion, and the other 2 completed and open for business yesterday. And I make no apologies for steering around the conversation to this element, because staff and pupils alike are absolutely thrill-skinny with the outcome of the endeavours of the last 12 months, and indeed the endeavours prior to the building process, because a tremendous amount of work has gone into this in terms of our engagement with Welsh Government, our engagement with the appropriate officers in finance and so on and so forth. Everybody has had their input here, but I reserve the biggest praise for the way in which the Education Department, against a backdrop of tremendous obstacles and furore at many stages of the process, have brought this almost to fruition. I say almost in the context of Cross Caelog. There's still a lot of work there to be done, but I'm sure that the outcome will be as appreciated as the outcomes of our 3 new schools. Just one final thing, the 3rd new school will be open sometime after Christmas, towards February half term. They were approximately 3.5–4 months behind schedule to begin with because of hold-ups in terms of access, but they've made up probably half of that time, so everything is on track for opening at half term in February. And I'd like to say that the health of school buildings in the area has improved. It is improving. It will continue to improve under the 21st Century Schools programme. And long may it rain.
Well done. Gunaya?
Thank you, Leader. Just clarification, really, Linda. I have a granddaughter that goes to Crossy School, so did I need to declare that?
Yes, I think probably for the purposes that would probably be a personal interest in relation to that, so we'll catch that.
Apologies for that, Leader.
Right. Any other member want to make a comment? If not, you see the recommendations there on page 40. All agree, show. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. This is a report to seek approval from Cabinet for a draft financial inclusion strategy for Torfaen. The Appendix 2 is a copy of the draft financial inclusion strategy. It's a 5-year strategy covering 2016 to 21. Some key messages, really, I suppose, for Torfaen: tackling poverty and financial exclusion has been an issue for a number of years. I think Cabinet will be well aware of the issues facing Torfaen residents around global recession, austerity, welfare reforms, etc. A lot of work has been undertaken over a number of years, but there's a welfare reform project group as a multi-agency group that works hard to mitigate the impacts of welfare reforms in Torfaen and also to tackle poverty. So the draft strategy has been developed in consultation with the Welfare Reform Group, and as such, the Welfare Reform Project Group, reporting to the Public Service Board as required, will oversee the implementation of the strategy. The strategy itself includes some key sort of infographics and statistics that paints a picture, not just for Torfaen locally, but also provides a Welsh context. The strategy essentially is looking to see how residents of Torfaen can access advice and support, increase their skills, knowledge and confidence to manage money, and access financial products and services. And some key messages for Torfaen as well is there are actually a number of financial inclusion services already available across the borough. What the strategy tries to do is actually coordinate those services so that people don't fall through the gaps. And 4.7 shows the sort of key 4 areas of activity that the Welfare Reform Project Group will be looking at through the implementation of the strategy. So around maximising immediate help and support for residents, targeting workless households, identifying those at risk of moving into poverty, and coordinating bespoke communication messages so that people can receive services and access them more cohesively. There is a wellbeing assessment that was attached to the strategy as well, and that's as Appendix 1. So basically, it's to ask that Cabinet approve the adoption of this strategy for the next 5 years, and its implementation being shared by partners across Torfaen for the coming 5 years.
Right, thank you for that. Who's any members going? Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, I think it falls in my my sort of territory for a number of reasons, because I chair the PSB delivery group, which has tasked the Welfare Reform Project Group, which I also chair, which has tasked ELCA to do this. So yeah, I'd just like to thank ELCA for leading on this, and all the Welfare Reform Project Group partners for all their work, contributing towards it. As Elka said earlier, the landscape has changed significantly over the past decade with global recession and a raft of welfare reform changes, which has disproportionately impacted on our area. More people are in personal debt. People are struggling, but childhood poverty is on the rise. So it's important that we have a document like this, that we have an opportunity like this, where we reassess the landscape and see what we're doing as a council, which I think actually this demonstrates that we are actually doing as much as we can do as a local council to try and mitigate some of the worst excesses of welfare reform. And it also key to this is it includes a list of gaps, which I think is now incumbent on us various bodies to start looking at how we can address them. And you know, referencing back earlier what I said about you know, taking an opportunity to focus on prevention and early intervention, that features heavily in this as well, and it will do, because we do need to start thinking about trying to kind of stem the demand somewhere down the line. And that's a bloody difficult task, if you don't mind my language, because whilst we keep getting the same sorts of ideology coming out of Westminster, which is cut, and ignoring the person, I think that we are, you know, our arms tied really here. So we are doing the best that we can, but yeah.
Right, thanks for that, Dave. Well done, and well done, Anthony.
Thank you for the report, and for Dave and Dave Congreve and the staff on the work they've done on this. I think it's important for us in this context to talk about both austerity and welfare reforms in two contexts, really. First, from the point at which I think we need to make clear as members that we oppose the concept of austerity and of the welfare reforms. I think both fail even on their own terms. Austerity, the notion that by cutting public services you somehow boost prosperity in the country, is like digging yourself deeper and deeper into a hole. I think we're seeing this with the UK government missing their own targets and then latterly giving up on the targets that they had set in the first place. Austerity doesn't work even on financial terms, and it has a massive human and social cost that we see in many of our communities. So I think we need to state that clearly. In terms of welfare reforms, again, the ambition that they have to help people back into work, well, that's what they say, is all well and good, but quite how plunging people into poverty crisis of the types that we see regularly in our communities help people, often with deep-rooted problems to do with literacy or self-confidence or anything, get back into work. I'm yet to discover how plunging someone into the depths of despair, homelessness, child poverty, not being able to feed their families, quite how that helps people get back into the world of economic productivity, I'll never quite know. Because let's be frank about it, we're seeing a massive epidemic of child poverty in this country, the likes of which we thought were sort of assigned to history. Child poverty, which halved under the last government, is now right back up, and that's as a direct consequence of both austerity and welfare reforms. So I think we need to say that quite clearly. But of course our main responsibility isn't to just say that, it's to try and do what we can to help people and minimise the impact on our communities. And I think this is an excellent strategy, both in terms of doing what we can to make the services available and to coordinate in partnership with other people to make sure that people receive a service. People don't care, especially if they're in a situation of crisis, whether they receive a service from us or from someone else. What they expect is all the different agencies to work together to act out and to help people in their time of need. So I think we can all welcome the strategy and the project group to implement it and look forward to them making a real difference. Unfortunately, we can't change the decisions that are made above our heads by UK government. All we can do is what we can do as a council to try and help people.
Good, thanks for that. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Elke. Excellent report. You see the report is on page 50, all agreed, sure? Thank you very much for that. Now then, we're on to item 9, which is the transfer of Blanavon Heritage VC School Middle Coed Care.
Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, carry on, Tim.
Right, I'll just get the report up for you there, members, on screen. This is a somewhat unusual matter in that the purpose of this report is to ask that the Council agree to the transfer of the Blanavon Heritage Voluntary Control School at Middle Coed Kai Road, Blanavon, to a charitable trust, and also pay the trust's agreed costs of £3,750. There is quite a history to this matter, which is set out in terms of the background from paragraph 4 onwards. It's a matter that goes back many years, and it's an unfortunate situation that this council and this council's officers have inherited from the statutory predecessor, Torfaen Borough Council. You'll see that originally in the 19th century, the trust was established It operated from premises up until the 1980s at Church Road, and it then moved to an address in Park Street in Blaenabon. And for reasons which are not clear from any of the ancient papers and files I've looked at, the required statutory transfer of the Park Street site never occurred. And in fact, when I first came into this matter, which was quite a few years ago, we were trying to achieve some sort of settlement around the Park Street site, but that was then overtaken because of the movement of the school from Park Street up to the current site at the campus development at Middle Coed Kai Road, which was the second relocation, if you like, of the school originally established by the Trust. So, in short, things were a bit of a pickle in that we had a movement of a school in the early 80s when there should have been a statutory transfer of the much of the premises from which the school operated, which hadn't taken place. And we then had a subsequent transfer in 2011, when again a transfer should have taken place in accordance with the relevant statutory requirements. At that stage, the 1998 School Standards and Framework Act. And neither of those things had taken place. Matters were further complicated by the fact that the Trust themselves were bound by their obligations as a registered charity to comply with the requirements of the Charity Commission, and thus there have been a number of parties involved in this matter over a number of years, and that partly explains, I think, the inordinate delay, really, in getting the thing to a satisfactory solution. But we are at that point now, and you'll see that the Trust are now agreeable, having had Charity Commission approval to it, to effectively abandon any claim they may have had in relation to the Park Street site, and they will proceed on the basis that we simply now transfer the new site across to them, and that is something we're obliged to do anyhow in accordance with the statutory requirements, and that will enable the council then to dispose of the old site, the Park Street site, as it sees fit. It is the case that the Trust have been involved in this matter over many years, as you'll appreciate, as we have. There's been extensive negotiations. We are now in a position whereby the Trust, the Charity Commission and the Council have all agreed that this is the most cost-effective and expedient way forward. So if I take you straight then, members, to the conclusion of the report at paragraph 10, you'll see we wish to take actions that will correct this historical anomaly. We need to transfer the Middle Coed Kai site to the Trust, and the Trust will then abandon any claim they may still have in relation to the Park Street site, and that will enable the Council to dispose of that site as it sees appropriate. And the recommendations are therefore set out in paragraph 11. That's the
right, thank you very much for that, Tim. Good report. This is basically a tidying up exercise, isn't it? Any members want to make a comment? If not, then you see the recommendations on page 79, all agreed show. Thank you for that. Thank you, Tim. Now then, the next one is item 10, which is Sentry and Communication Support Service Collaboration.
Leader, I'm joined today by Roger Thurlbeck, who's the Head of Service for the Sentry and Communication Services, who's got some expert knowledge, obviously, and it might be useful if there are any particular questions that we can ask Roger about those. Hopefully, Leader, this is quite a straightforward proposal, but a bit complicated to achieve. So what we're looking at today is the request, really, from the Education Service to look at us using our collaboration framework to explore us taking over the Gwent, taking over the Gwent Visual Impairment Service from Caerphilly and bringing that into our remit and us running that service on behalf of the 5 partners in the former Gwent. So currently we already have the hearing impairment service that we provide on a regional basis, and the communication intervention team, which again all 5 authorities contribute to and provides service to children and young people with communication difficulties across the region. The proposal here is that we look at bringing all three services together under one management structure, run by a joint committee. And the suggestion here is that we already have the Joint Executive Group as a joint committee who oversees the work of the EAS, that Councillor Yule and his counterpart sit on, and that would become the joint committee which we would report into. And that we also look at a new collaboration agreement. One of the risks that we currently have in these services is that there isn't a clear collaboration agreement in place. So it's really custom and practice that's grown up over time. If something were to change in one of the services, people had to be made redundant, for example, the rules around that aren't very clear. So this is also an opportunity for us to put a model in place for a collaboration agreement that would be useful for all the collaborative services going forward. But we know we've quite a bit of work to do to nail that one down as part of this discussion. So there's a lot of detail in the report, Leader, but in essence that's what we're seeking permission for. There are risks here, because clearly we need to make sure that collaboration agreement protects us from any potential risk going forward, but we think the benefits which are highlighted in section 6.3 and following will make sure that we can achieve this change without moving anyone, because everyone's co-located at the moment, without looking at additional costs, because we think the cost envelope that we already have is sufficient, and without losing posts.
Thank you, Dermot. Thank you, Mr. Thurbuck. David, do you want to make a comment?
Only to say that this has been the subject of detailed conversations with other inputs, particularly with Caerphilly, who had the responsibility for this element prior to us. It makes sense to have all of these services effectively in one place. And I suppose it's a testament to the high regard that the Torfaen Educational Services held in, that there is common agreement that we are best placed to handle this issue. And I'm sure that that is the case. I'm interested to hear what our friend here has to say about the situation. I'm sure that he can, even if he's not asked any questions, he's more than able to shed a little bit more light on this.
Thanks for that. Any members got any questions or comments? Sorry.
Okay, yes. I came into post as the head of the Communications and Central Communications Support Service in September 2015. As Dermot has mentioned, those three teams that I manage are co-located in the same building in Cwmbran at the moment. They were very much separate entities working across the 5 authorities, and what we've been working towards achieving is actually bringing those services in alignment, looking at how we can share our expertise. There's a huge amount of skill and experience across the 3 teams. We want to make sure that we make the best use of those for our most vulnerable learners. As we've developed our practices together in a collaborative way within that building, we have realised that we are coming up against barriers now which are stopping us moving on to the next level. A lot of those are around aligning administrative functions for the service, because each of the services has their own admin function at the moment. But there are also policies and practices which we would like to align together, and exploring this proposal would help us to see how we can move the service forward to make sure that for the next 3 to 5 years, when we have a 5-year draft strategic plan, we can support our learners across the region. Okay.
Anybody want to ask a question? No? If not, then you see the recommendations on page 92, all agree, sure. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Roger. Thank you, Dermot. We're on now to item 11, which is the voluntary participation to support unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and also vulnerable children and refugees' families. Over to you.
Thank you, Leader, and good morning, Cabinet. The report you have today follows on from last month's Council and subsequent conversations led by Councillor David Daniels with colleagues from both the Home Office, WLJ and Wales Strategic Migration Partnership. The background being the Home Office, in discharging its humanitarian duties, has requested local authorities across the UK to further voluntarily participate in 2 new schemes focused very much upon vulnerable children. The schemes are supporting unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and also a vulnerable children resettlement programme. At Council, there was general support for the Council to consider further participation, and this report sets out the next steps. In consultation with colleagues across both the Council and its partners, and taking account of our existing commitments and ability to deliver, we are proposing to support these schemes through accepting 2 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and 2 families through the VCRP scheme. This would be in addition to the existing Syrian refugee programme of resettling 6 families. We believe this number is realistic and within our abilities to deliver quickly and in consultation with both the Home Office and the WLGA. Both schemes are funded, and should Cabinet agree, Councillor Daniels and myself will make a formal offer to the Home Office to participate. Thank you, Leader.
Brendan, Dave?
Yeah, sure. Cheers, Leader. Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just to start by saying, this is right. Participating in these 2 schemes is obviously right. These are vulnerable children who've gone through horrific experiences that we can't even imagine, and who otherwise, if they hadn't been picked up and taken in by the UK, would have been left exploited to child traffickers, sexual exploitation, and all sorts of other horrors. So it's absolutely right that we're taking part in this, and I'm really proud that we're doing this, and incredibly proud that we were one of the first to, if not, I think we were one of the first local authorities to participate in the Syrian resettlement programme last year, and that seems to have panned out very well indeed, actually, with some of the children excelling in schools. One child in particular is top of his class, and he's even learning Welsh and doing really well. So this shows what sort of new start that we can give to these children, and why we should be doing this, because these children have had their childhoods put on hold in the most awful and abrupt way, and we can do something here. We can do something about it. So there's a lot of talk about it, but we can actually do something. And yeah, I'm just glad. I was glad to have the council's support. I was relieved that there was no objections from anybody at all, and I'd be glad to have your support today. So yeah, I commend this report to you.
Good, thanks for that. I made an announcement last week in the WLG conference that every local authority now in Wales have received refugees and people that are fleeing. And like you, I'm very proud of our council, and I'm sure lots of other members are as well. So, without any further ado, you see the report, all agree, Shaw? Thanks very much for that. Thank you, Linda. Item 12 now. Item 12 is the annual report on complaints 2015-16 and 2016-17. Over to you, Ed, and your colleague.
Thank you, Leader. Can I introduce Karen Davis? I'm sure most of you will know Karen. She's been with us a long time. She's our complaints and FOI manager. Karen's going to run you through the main body of the report, members, but before she did, I thought I'd just highlight the fact that although the report demonstrates an improving position, we've made some changes through the admin and business support review over the last few months that has now seen Karen oversee a centralised team. So what she's going to talk you through, we're anticipating, will improve again. We have more resilience, more contingency, and that central team is now doing great things, not just in terms of dealing with complaints, but also using them to drive service improvements to stop the complaints happening in the first case. So Karen's going to go into the detail. If you've got any questions around matters of detail, I'll hand over to Karen, but any of the more strategic stuff I'm happy to deal with. Okay.
Thanks so much, Ed.
Good morning, all. The purpose of me coming along today is to provide you with an overview of the complaints that we've received for the financial year 15-16 and the first half of this year. During the last financial year, we received 170 complaints. That was a 21.6% decrease on the previous year. I think that was quite positive, considering there was a large project with the rollout of the skinny bins. The overall response rate at the time for the authority was 95.3%, which was above the agreed target of 95% for the first time ever. During the first half of this year, we've had 77 complaints. Again, that's a slight decrease of 6% on the same time last year. Unfortunately, as Ed just said, that we had a bit of a performance issue in the first half of this year due to changes in personnel, but hopefully we're back on track with that now. And the recommendation is just that Cabinet note the information presented in the report, and that we work with the newly formed complaints and FOI team to reduce the number of complaints. The complaints received by the authority are actually dealt with by two separate processes. We've got a statutory social care process and a corporate complaints process, which is guidance followed by the Welsh Government. Previously, each area had a nominated complaints officer who dealt with things in addition to other work, but now that's all managed centrally by a coordinated team. So we're hoping that all of the outcomes now are going to be managed centrally, and we'll be able to learn more from that and share that information as well. The summary of the complaints received by service area will be in Appendix 1, but what I just wanted to say was overall the complaints have decreased by Stage 1, Stage 2 and the Ombudsman. And then this year there's been a slight increase in complaints to the Ombudsman, but some of these were premature. We had one investigation during the last financial year. The complaint was not upheld. It related to a social care complaint. We dealt with this appropriately at the time, the Ombudsman said, but that he said that we should have advised the complainant that they could have actually raised the complaint after they completed court action. There's been no investigations this year, and just one comment where we could have better informed somebody how to follow the process. Scroll down. Like I said, there's a full breakdown by service area if you'd like to see that in Appendix 1. I won't go through all of that with you. Overall, there was a large reduction in complaints received for education, neighbourhood services and planning. There was a slight increase in complaints with social care and housing. And that's all the detail of those complaints there. The response rates, I think, are something that is worth mentioning. I've said that we've exceeded the target in the first year of 95% for the first time, which was, I think, quite important for us because we're focusing on that. And the actual number of late responses that we had this year, sorry, I've just mentioned that as well. That was a little blip due to the admin and business services review. What we're focusing on now is complaint prevention. When I'm working with service areas, we don't just have to have a complaint to focus on the lessons learned. And some areas that we focused on last year, there was a skinny bin project group, which I joined with some colleagues from neighbourhood services. We've got a customer services improvement group to learn lessons from previous complaints. We've improved on communication channels through generic mailboxes. We've undertaken some training, and we've got to get some publications from the Ombudsman, which we can learn from investigations they've investigated with other authorities. We've been to overview and scrutiny last year. There were some recommendations from them that the new team will work through regarding focusing on training, improved communication, sharing complaints throughout the authority. Finally, in conclusion, we're provided with an awful lot of information that I think if we don't share throughout the authority, we're missing on the opportunity to learn lessons there. The officers are aware that it's very difficult sometimes to focus on that when you're very busy. But I think, if we miss on that, there's obviously extra cost and extra workload involved with everyone there. So the focus of the new team is to shift away from just supporting areas to actually looking, with complaints, to actually looking at more of the intelligence and to see how we can work together going forward to actually work on more preventative work. In the short time the team's been together, we've actually worked with a couple of service areas already, and I think we've had some good results so far. So just the recommendation is that Cabinet note the information in the report and the work being undertaken by the new team.
Thank you for that, Canon. You obviously put a lot of work into this. Anthony, good night, everyone.
Thanks, Karen. can't imagine what it must be like for you and your team, waking up every morning knowing you're going to deal with complaints. But you do it and you do it well, and we can be very proud of the fact that you and your team have handled this very, very well. It hasn't been easy, I know that, but we are on the, we are seeing benefits now from the way you've rescheduled your team and how you work well together. But I would like to say a personal thank you to you, because it hasn't been easy, but we are seeing results now that we can be proud of. There'll always be complaints. That's a fact of life, isn't it? But the way you handle it has been all credit to you and your team. So thank you, Karen.
But Lewis, let me bring Lewis in. And then
Yes, I certainly support every word that Gwynair has said, because there has been a transformation, there's no doubt about it. Remember not so long back that I was inundated with complaints, especially from older people, that they were coming in to the customer services, and there's one guy who I've known all my life, I could rely on every word he said, had been in 4 times in a month, but there was no record of him ever being there. Now, I spoke to you at the time, and also what brought a lot of the complaints on was the new service of the telephone system, and also the changeover with the bins and all those kind of things. So there's lots of stuff all coming in together. But one of the things that people couldn't understand, where they come in to address a concern, but it wasn't regarded as a complaint. There's a whole lot of processes got to go through before it's recognised as a complaint. But as I say, there's a complete transformation gone on, and I congratulate everybody who's been involved in it. Thanks very much.
Here you are. No, they're not.
Just wanted to back Gwynair up, and a 21.6% decrease in complaints is a tribute to the work that you've done, your team's done, and the work that Gwynair has done too. So I think we all welcome that. Also, it's good to hear some positive aspects of the Admin and Business Services Review and the increased resilience that's given you, and seemingly the increased strategic overlook of it as well. It's not just about dealing with the complaints. As you said, it's about using intelligence to help prevent them happening in the first place, because the more we get things right first time, the less demand you'll have to, and the less of your team's time will be taken up dealing with those. I was speaking to the leader of Swansea, funny enough, about sort of the IT aspects of this and how that can be used to maybe to improve things. And I think they've got a package that they're using to help sort of with that sort of move from just dealing with complaints to looking at the intelligence of what comes up and sort of looking to prevent from there. So that might be something worth discussing with them.
Right, thanks for that. Anybody else want to make any comments? If not, then we see the report and the recommendations. All show, please. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Karen. That is the last item on the agenda, so I'll close the meeting.